They've been there since day one.
Pretty good.
Good morning.
These library cuts, are they fall under what people are calling the loss of money for cultural dollars and things like that?
Actually, it's a different program because the money that's been cut for arts and culture has been cut out of the Department of Heritage. This funding comes from Industry Canada. And of course, I took up the issue of literacy and supporting libraries during the debates with Mr. Harper, and he said that the $17 million that was cut from literacy programs, and that was from yet another department, that was from Human Resources. These funding cuts are small. They're not about fiscal prudence. They're not about finding individual programs that don't make sense. So the arts and culture cuts have not been about a fiscal review to find things that don't make sense. They've been a very specific overlay of censorship on the arts community. So Bill C-10 to say that only certain films can get funding, or saying that having our leading intellectuals speaking around the world to bring a connection of really the exchange of ideas, so that Canadians on the world stage are seen as having a real independent identity, as having a contribution, whether it's John Ralston Saul or Gwynne Dyer. We have a lot of intellectual strength in this country that communicates around the world in a way that improves Canada's reputation on the world stage. I mean, we're less than 0.5% of the global population, but when we send our best brains, best artists, our theater companies, all these programs for arts exchange internationally are about Canada on the world stage. And what the Harper government seems to be saying is we don't want our artists to be heard on the world stage because some of them may not be voting Conservative. That's really censorship. So the arts cuts didn't make sense in terms of fiscal responsibility. Cuts to these kinds of programs have to do with a failure to understand that community matters. This kind of bean counter mentality that Mr. Harper's brought to government which is why he doesn't think Atlantic Canada matters, because from his point of view, it's economically irrational for us to live here at all. And that is a problem in his mindset. And then there's the cuts to literacy programs, $17 million cut to literacy programs. Well, those cuts they defend, as you heard him say, if you watch the debates, those weren't really teaching people to read. No, the $17 million were for the programs for literacy advocacy to help the programs that then on the ground teach people to read. So if you cut $17 million out of support for literacy, you're pulling the rug out from under the people who are teaching people to read. But this has been their justification. All the women's programs that were cut, same thing. Is, oh, those programs weren't really helping women, unlike the money they gave to their Conservative candidate in Halifax, who seems to have taken the cash and run. These programs for advocacy for women's rights are not necessarily actually running the places that women go to get out of an abusive spousal relationship. They are running the advocacy programs to protect women's rights and make sure women know what their rights are. And that's the very kind of program that's been completely eliminated. So there's a common denominator to the kind of cuts, whether it's Industry Canada or health and welfare or the arts and culture programs, or things that right across the board that assist for advocacy rights and community work, such as for HIV/AIDS. All the community funding for HIV/AIDS advocacy has been wiped out the last 2 years. $11 million went missing on helping community groups that were educating people about HIV/AIDS. The overall funding, by the way, for HIV/AIDS went up, but it went to all different kinds of programming, which are very important for searching for a vaccine, for instance. But where there's a common denominator is that the Harper government doesn't like community access programs right across the board.